happens that this year now, this is the seventh anniversary of, I don't know if you want to call it anniversary of the start of World War II, but anyway, June was a big month for me. Of course, June's a big month for you also, I guess. It's going to be a big change. You're going to be leaving the school here for June. I remember back when we were in elementary school, every time June came along, I remember we would, all the kids would be going out the door singing, no more papers, no more books, no more teachers' dirty looks. But then by the time we got to high school, of course, then we thought it was a lot of difference. We hated to leave our teacher for a whole summer that way. Didn't know what he was going to do with himself. Anyway, June is also a big month. It's the 150th anniversary of the first aeronautical unit that was created for the U.S. Army. They put up balloons during the Civil War, and so it's they did aerial reconnaissance from tethered balloons and whatnot during the Civil War. Also, June now is another end of the space shuttle program. So, and then of course for me, June was the month that I first reported into the military. I got my invitation from the President Roosevelt. That was not Theodore, but Teddy. Not Teddy, but Franklin it was. Yes, that was the right president. So, anyway, when I first got my invitation, I thought maybe I'd make a good Marine or something, but at the time they said, well, the Marine quota was filled, so they stuck me in the Army Air Force at the time. And so instead of learning how to swim, they had to teach me how to march. You know, you learn your right hand from your left hand like this, or your right foot from your left foot. I was never good at marching. I could never keep in step, so they made me the right guide, so everybody else to keep in step with me. Other than marching, one of the other first things they always taught us in the service was how to sing. And we had to sing, learn, of course, the Air Force. Everybody had to sing that, and with a lot of gusto also. Then we sang a lot of other songs. Some of them you can't repeat in public. But I remember one of them was, I understand they even teach it at Boy Scouts nowadays, and that's, I've got sixpence, jolly, jolly sixpence. I've got sixpence to last me all my life. I got 2 pence to spend and 2 pence to lend and 2 pence to send home to my wife, poor wife. I was sent down to Hastings, Nebraska for my basic training, where we learned the things like I was talking about, marching and stuff. And then also at Hastings, Nebraska, also we had what was called college prep classes also, where we learned certain things like aerodynamics and weather, other items like that. And so from Hastings I went to Santa Ana, which was a classification place. I was put in a classification to become a pilot. They had 1,500 people in the class to become pilots, and the pilot schools were all filled at the time. They needed navigators. Nobody was volunteering to be a navigator, and Bob will find that strange. But anyway, so I was selected. They took out of the 1,500 people, they took the people. They told us took the people with the highest scores and sent us to navigation school. So anyway, after 16 weeks in navigation school, why they had us, they made us officers and gentlemen, and of course we were supposed to learn how to navigate at the same time too. But naturally we were gentlemen all the time anyway. We went up to Ardmore, Oklahoma, where I met up with the crew and also saw the B-17 for the first time. At that time, of course, I thought that was a big airplane. And nowadays, of course, I don't think it doesn't look quite so big when you put it alongside of just one of your passenger planes nowadays. I remember when in the B-17, the Navigator had a position that was up in the nose, right next to where the bombardier was. You had to go down through a relatively small tunnel between the pilot and co-pilot to get up into your position. I had an opportunity about 2 years ago to get back into a B-17, and when I crawled up into the nose up there, and And it was a little more difficult now than it used to be back then. And of course, when I had to turn around and get back out, it was more difficult yet. We had, I was assigned to the 8th Air Force. The 8th Air Force at the time was given a job along with the English there. We were supposed to support the English in the bombing of Europe. The English had attempted to do daytime bombing and whatnot, but they suffered so many losses that they switched over to nighttime bombing. And so when we got over there, we decided with the B-17, they referred to it as a flying fortress, that we had like 13 machine guns on there and whatnot. We'd fly in formation, that we'd be safe. We could handle the German fighters and whatnot. So the English had given up on daytime and only flew at nighttime. We started flying in the daytime. We had to borrow some airplanes from the English to fly the first mission. That was in June of '42. And in July of '42, we had the first total American bombing raid on, and it was to a place over in France at the time. Germany at the time occupied France, so we were bombing places in France also. Luckily, there was no losses on that, but then on the second mission, there was 4 losses out of 12 planes, and it became quite obvious early on that the daytime bombing without fighter support, that the B-17s weren't as good at defense as we had figured in the first place. But I was assigned to a unit called the 100th Bomb Group. I remember when I first got overseas and I mentioned I was going to the 100th Bomb Group, somebody says, "Oh, the Bloody 100th." And I thought, well, the English lots of times will refer to something in a positive sense as bloody. They'll say like a bloody good show or something like that. So I thought maybe it was the English term that they were talking about, that it was a good outfit to be in. But it turned out that it was a little bit different than that. The outfit had some tremendous losses. Not at the end of the war, the losses weren't any greater than any other unit, but there was so often, there was about 8 different times that they'd send out a unit and they'd lose maybe 25% of the airplane, 12 out of 30% or 25, 12 out of 48 or 12 out of 36. It happened several times, and that's how it got the name of Bloody Unit. There was a story going around at the time that turned out it wasn't true, that the Germans were targeting the 100th Bomb Group because at one time the technique over there was that if you were going to surrender, if your plane was in bad shape, if you were going to surrender, you'd put your wheels down. When the German fighters would come around, you put your wheels down, indicating you were going to surrender. Well, they claimed one of our bombers did that one time, and then when the German fighters came in close, well, then the guys in the 17 shot at the fighters and whatnot. But there was no truth to the story, because even talking to German pilots after the war, they said it was just the sky was just too big for them to waste their time flying around looking for one specific unit to shoot at. And once they got into the air, they only had about 40, 50 minutes to stay up in the air that they had to get back on the ground and put fuel in the tanks again. So they were shooting at the first planes they could come across. So anyway, when I got into the unit, that was in December of 1944. We got in the unit, and that happened to be a couple of days later. That happened to be one of the days that they happened to lose 12 airplanes right after we got in there. So the mood in the unit was pretty much down at the time, and it also meant that we had to get up in the air quicker. So we didn't have the pilots didn't have as much time on practicing formation flying over there and whatnot that they needed. Our first mission over there, we ended up using up all our oxygen, and so we had to. We had in the unit we had small carry-around bottles. We had about 5 of them, so that meant there was 1 bottle for every 2 people. So we had to pass the bottle back and forth until we once we got out of Germany, we went down to lower altitude, left the formation. Then the pilot tells us we're short on gas, so then we had to find a place to land in France. We landed in France, and then the weather was so bad we couldn't get off the runway for the next 5 days. So we sat in France for 5 days. When we got back, to our unit, they had already boxed up some of our clothes and whatnot, and we're ready to send out missioning and action letters. But luckily, we got back there in time before they sent those messages out. And like I say, I got over there in December of '44. At that time, from when the unit first started flying over there, they had, in the first 6 months, they had lost like 60 airplanes. That was almost half of the total number of units they had. So their losses were running like 50%. When I got out, and at that time, the guys only had to fly 25 missions. I don't know if you're familiar with the airplane Memphis Belle. That was one of the first airplanes that ever made it for the 25 missions, and that plane came back to the United States and went on tours and whatnot, selling war bonds at the time. But then by the time I got over there, we had fighter support, and we had to go 35 missions because it was much safer. In the 6 months that I was there, we only lost 16 airplanes, so it was quite a difference in the number of losses. We never had too much trouble when we were over there. There was only one guy got wounded. He got a piece of shrapnel in his leg, and he did kind of a strange thing. He missed a couple flights, but then he was back in the waist of the airplane, and we used to wear what we called flak jackets. Nowadays they wear body armor, but these were more like a vest. You just kind of put them over your head, and there was a piece in front and a piece in back, and it was just laid out flat and tied on the sides. Well, after he got hit in the leg that one time, he took 3 extra flak jackets and he laid them along one side of the plane in back where his position was at the waist gun, and then he 3 on the other side. So he less apt to get pieces of flak coming through and get them shrapnel. Well, that was a disadvantage to the guy down in the ball. At one time, when the guy was down in the ball turret and we had to avoid a collision, the co-pilot put the plane in a dive. Of course, the guy in the ball, when the plane goes into a dive like that, he thinks we got hit or something, so he comes popping out of the ball. He never could take his parachute with him in the ball. Wasn't enough room for it, and so he always had it set alongside the ball. But of course, when he came up out of the ball, all these flak jackets had been flying around, and he had to dig through all the flak jackets to find his parachute before he finally realized that there was nothing wrong with the airplane. That extra dive there, that was actually right at the time of bombs away. So we had, at that time, we had 2 1,000 bombs and 2 2,000 bombs on. One 2,000 pound and one 1,000 pound went out, but the other 2 were hanging up in the bomb bay. One of them had come loose on one of its hangers and had slid forward enough to punch a hole up in the front bulkhead. But of course, these were outside of the pins being pulled. They weren't armed because they had like propeller on the front of the bombs that had to spin so often before the bomb was totally armed. So the bombardier had to go back and dump those 2 out, those extra bombs. That turned out to be kind of an exciting mission in a way also, because then we were all alone over there. And they had briefed us on the coast of Holland. They said it was clear, coast of Holland was clear. So we went down to low altitude. We were about, once we figured we were across the lines into Allied territory, we were down to about 1,000 feet, and we were flying over these islands off of Holland, and the Germans were still on the islands, and so we were getting fire from them from low altitude. Luckily, they missed on that one, too. Lots of times, or I shouldn't say lots of times, but several times the missions were kind of disappointing in a sense. You were going out there with an idea that you were going to do something that was going to have an effect on the war and whatnot. But I remember the one time, only one time we flew a low altitude mission. We were down at about 12,000 feet. We usually flew up around 22 to 25,000 feet when dropping the bombs. One time we were down to 12,000 feet, and they dropped the bombs, and this is one of the few times that I could look out and I could see the bombs hitting the ground, and I saw we missed the target by, it must have been at least 1,000 feet. I could see the bombs landing in an apple orchard or some type of orchard down below. One of the jokes was every once in a while that we were trying to starve the Germans that way, so dropping the bombs in cabbage patches and orchards and things like that. We had, anyway, we completed 30, the crew completed 33 missions. I only did 32. I happened to take my birthday off. That was always the deal, you know, you always get your birthday off. I was in the hospital, that's why I missed it. But, let's see, where am I going now? One of the things over in England now, they've got quite a place set up over in England up at the place called Duxford, which happened to be a fighter base during the war, and they have a cemetery up there, and in the cemetery they have a piece of poetry that was actually written in honoring the veterans of World War I, but since it was applicable to the veterans also of World War II, it's inscribed on a wall at the cemetery up in Duxford. You're probably familiar with the poem. In Flanders fields the poppies blow, between the crosses row on row, that mark our place, and in the sky the larks still bravely fly, scarce heard amid the guns below. And on the last part of that is, take up our quarrel with the foe, to you, from falling hands we throw the torch, be yours to hold it high. Now that phrase has been used not only Kennedy during his inauguration speech, he even used that term, that this new generation, that the torch is being thrown to you. So, I had finished my 32 missions. The war was over. After the war was over, we flew a couple food drops in Holland. That was quite interesting. We'd come in at low altitudes. The Germans were still occupying Holland. We had to make a special armistice with them. But they wouldn't shoot at it. So it's interesting, when you fly low enough, you could see the people would come in at 200-300 feet to drop the food. And you could see the German soldiers standing alongside the road and the people waiting for the food drop. So it was kind of interesting. Normally, you never, when you're flying, you never see the enemy. So you never see what the damage your bombs are doing because you're at high altitude. In some cases, even when you're shooting at the German airplanes and whatnot, it's almost like doing it on a video game that you could play nowadays. There's nothing personal about it. There was only one time I ever saw a German, and it probably just, he made a mistake. He stalled out right off of our wing, and I looked at him, I could see him, and he looked like he was looking at me, but I suppose he was looking at how close he had come to ramming us. And I had my gun pointed right at him, pulled the trigger, and it happened to be on safety. So that was but the only time I saw a German was when I had my gun on safety. That was their intention at one time was to ram us. So it could have been that he had been trying to ram us at the time, and he got that close where I could see him. If they didn't ram, we lost 4 airplanes to ramming that day. We flew in one of them about 8 days later that the maintenance had repaired and whatnot and put it back in shape. So I completed my missions. We stayed over in England up until about September and then flew back to the States. got a separation. I missed the service so much that I went back in and about 2 years later and spent 20 years in service after that. All right, thank you.